Welcome to the Jeremy Mullins podcast, where we take a deep dive into different educational topics to help you optimize your life. I'm Jeremy, I'm your host, and I'm here with a special guest today, Mr. Bryan Pieschel, just like Michelle with a P, as he instructed, because I'm from Appalachia and I generally butcher names. Bryan is a former Army medic, and I want to say doctor, and we'll get into this because we as soldiers we call our army medics, especially combat medics, doctors, right? And it's not that you don't have a PhD, you don't have an MD, but in the eyes of that soldier, you are the doc, which I do want to get into. And you're currently serving as director of veteran services at Dogs for the Brave, which is our goal to talk about today. And also talking about a little future partnership that you and I are going to have where I am blessed and feel very grateful to come in and do some education for our veterans, inside of the health space, whether that be nutrition, whether that be exercise, sleep, um, or even I like to say mental and spiritual. I'm not a gosh, I'm drawing a blank. I'm not a pastor by any means, but I think spiritual sometimes comes in, just the thought process and goes hand in hand with, the mental, health and how we're thinking, from that aspect. So without further ado, thank you, sir, for taking the time out of your day to be on the podcast.
Jeremy, thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity to come out and speak about the mission, dive into mind, body, spirit relationship, finding balance, right, finding peace, all topics that are pretty heavy within the veteran community, and very necessary. We're off to a good start. We've established that I'm not really a doctor, and you're not really a pastor, but
Yes.
what we do what we do is, it falls in both of those realms. Yeah, we're off to a good start.
Yeah, it's just you're clearing the air, right? Like,
Yes.
please consult your doctor for the information we provide you today. I think that's what
Right.
our partners tell us to say.
Our
Um,
disclaimer.
Yeah, but no, we're on totally, both of us, are medical, inside of, services. I am still serving, inside the National Guard. You, of course, have wrapped up your serving as far as, being on the uniform. Um, but you were combat, met and medic and I like to say totally different ends, because I'm doing more preventative things. I'm doing more maybe on the other end, the post end, fixing things, right? But you were there in the fix of it, where a lot of times it was life or death with the care that you were giving. So how many years were you in? Just give us a little bit of history there, because we didn't get into it. I'm curious, and I think the listeners always like to hear a little bit of a story, especially because I think this will lead to why you're so passionate and what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So I enlisted in 2004. I was an old guy. Um, got the nickname Grandpa pretty quickly at basic. I was 26 when I enlisted. And the driving force behind it was 9/11. Like a lot of guys in our generation, 9/11 was a calling for me. I wrestled with it for a couple years. Obviously, I was coaching in college at the time, and I always assumed that coaching volleyball, coaching men's volleyball, that was my career path. That's what I was going to do. It's my passion. I love it. I love being in the gym. But 9/11 really started making me question a lot of things about service to country and whatnot. My father was a National Guardsman, sorry, reservist, during the Vietnam era. He was not um, called to action in Vietnam due to being a small business owner and having a couple small kids already by that point, my two older sisters. So my brother was, Marine reservist. 9/11 really, well, again, it was a calling. So when I made that decision, I honestly did not talk to anybody about it at all. Nobody knew. Nobody in my family. Um, Nobody. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I knew it was one of those decisions. I wasn't married. I wasn't in a serious relationship. Obviously, didn't have any children. Um, I ultimately just trusted my gut and knew that if I didn't do this, it's something I would regret for the rest of my life. Um, so went in the recruiter's office, wanted to be a medic. That's the only job I wanted. Um, I took the ASVAB. And they really tried to push me into the psyops world because of my scoring. They're like, you pretty much can do whatever you want, and they're like, we have slots and need for psyops, and I'm like, I'm going to be a medic. Bottom line, I'd actually talked to the Navy first about wanting to be a corpsman, but they could not guarantee that I wouldn't end up on a ship, and I'm like, nah, not what I'm looking for. I want to put boots on the ground. The Army, present, and I was really grateful for the naval recruiter to be upfront and honest with me about that. He's like, look, he's like, we can put a lot of things in your contract, but he's like, that's one thing that we absolutely just we can't guarantee that you're going to be attached to, a Marine Corps unit. And, obviously if you're attached to a Marine Corps unit, you're putting boots on the ground at that time, because we're talking, 2003, 2004. So, um, yeah, ended up serving from '04 to '09. I was fast tracked through my medical training due to having some previous EMT training and licensing already. So they actually bumped me up by like 6 or 8 weeks, I think, which coincided pretty well. And it's, funny how things work out. I ended up being stationed, of all places, at Fort Leonard Wood. And being a St. Louis guy, I got my orders and I'm like, eh, luckily through coaching, I traveled all over the country. So where I was stationed didn't really, I mean, it's like I've seen most of the country at that point. So I'm like, yeah, Fort Leonard Wood, huh? Never would have guessed that one. But my big concern was I was going to be assigned to the hospital there, which again, it's just you take the orders, you do your job, and you do it well. But I really wanted to go help in Iraq. So luckily, fortunately, I was assigned to 5th Engineer Battalion, which was one of two deployable units at Fort Leonard Wood at the time. There was an MP unit, and then our engineer unit with 5th Engineers. We were the only two deployable units coming out of Fort Leonard Wood at that time. And since then, 5th Engineers actually left Fort Leonard Wood and split up, and now is at Fort Riley, I believe. Part of it's at Fort Riley, if I remember. So, anyways, very fortunate to end up the way we did. I got to the unit right after Memorial Day in 2005, and was informed quickly that we were getting spun up, and we were leaving that fall to deploy to Baghdad to run route clearance out of Camp Liberty. Um, so I was off to NTC within a very short time frame, and being the new medic, that was a huge opportunity for me. It was very eye opening to understand first and foremost. One of our senior NCOs at the time very quickly let me know that that title of doc would not be bestowed upon me until rightfully earned.
Yep.
Uh, Fortunately, I had some situations there at training in NTC, which, you know, have you had the privilege of being out there? Because what an experience.
Well, I was going to tease you a little bit. So you not only have we established that you're not a doctor, you also skipped 6 to 8 weeks of your training. Which, man,
Right.
I'm liking this story going along with your
Yeah.
history.
Yeah. It's, so getting out to NTC, that was eye opening. And there were some situations we were put in, and I reacted accordingly, and apparently, did the right thing per my soldier's eyes, which is,
Yes.
obviously the most important, aspect of the job, right? That, when things really get hot, they got to know that Doc can step up and do the job. Um, I did that in a training scenario, and was very blessed to earn the title of Doc per that same NCO. He's
Yeah.
like, all right, Doc, you're gonna figure this out. You'll be all right.
And
Um,
and sometimes that matters more than anything. I think in the service is getting a compliment or getting not necessarily an award, right? Like because but that term is an award, especially coming from certain rank and certain individuals.
Term of endearment and term of respect, and it is a title, husband, father, followed right behind it is Doc, right? Like that. I mean, that's that important of a title, and how closely I hold that to my heart. It's a massive responsibility. When you recognize, especially when you're going into a combat zone, and me not really knowing what route clearance was going to look like and what that entailed, I just knew that it was going to be significant, right? And ended up being very significant. It was not lost on me when we left for deployment and watching the wives and the children of those that I served with, you know, saying those goodbyes. Um, it that's when it really hit me. I always knew what, again, being older, being grandpa, being 26, I understood the responsibility that we were taking on in the medical field. But when you
Passion.
see that firsthand, it really locks you into what you're getting ready to go do and how on point you have to be with your job. Because you make a mistake, it costs lives. So, luckily I had an incredible. I was attached with an incredible medical unit. There were 10 of us, right? We had an NCO and then nine line medics. And running route clear at that time, oh five to '06. We were right in the middle of all the sectarian violence. We were in a we were caught in a full blown civil war. Um, and on top of that, we were there when the EFPs were introduced. Um, so the EFPs, what we believe coming over from Iran, that was just, it's the IED that nobody wanted to be involved with, because it was just a killer. Um, so
And I think this is what makes you such in your current position, such a great person to be in that position, right? And we could spend an hour, discussing your service. Um, and maybe we do that. Maybe we come back on and we you're like, no, no, don't want to go
I
down. Maybe I feel like
I give enough for exactly the point that you're going to, right?
yes,
Like,
yes, that's where I want to be translate.
I lost guys,
You,
saw a lot of guys get hemmed up real bad. I
you were injured.
I came within inches of not being here anymore. I am, because it was an EFP, that we were hit by. I can still see the fireball from 10 feet away, looking over my right shoulder. I can see it, a block north of Solder City, um, September 17th, 2006. So uh, those, that, and that's, I don't tell those stories and I don't really dive into heavy detail, not because I don't want to, but that's not the point. The point is that, veterans that I speak with understand that, especially combat veterans. I get it. I'm Doc and I get it. I've been there, I've seen it. I wasn't some tabbed out soldier. I wasn't out there, I was just an enlisted guy. Ended up getting out as an E5 that just wanted to help make a difference, right? I served my time, ended up being medically discharged, and yeah, that passion stems from all of that.
Yeah, I mean, you followed your gut, right? Because, like I said, you were doing the position that you wanted to do. You were a college volleyball coach, and you stepped out to serve. You stepped out to do that, right? And I always think like, man, we all have a calling, right? Sometimes it takes us a few years to get there, and it all works its way out, right? Which is kind of like, so you got out of the service and you went back to coaching volleyball, right? Now, was
Me,
there something in between? Like, was there another job in between that, or is it okay? Right back to volleyball.
no, I knew when I got out what I was going back. I knew that was the only thing that was going to save me. I was, Jeremy, I was really struggling when I got out. Unbelievable support from my chain of command. I know that's not always the case, um, but from our battalion commander all the way down, I had incredible support. They knew how rough that deployment was, especially on the medics, um, and they gave us unwavering support, and it was outstanding. And I can't thank them enough for that. But I knew when I got out that I had to have purpose immediately, and I knew volleyball was going to be that answer, right? It allowed me to pour myself into something purposeful while still struggling massively. I mean, if it wasn't for that family, that volleyball family that I was able to dive back into,
Yeah.
I don't know where I go when I get out. But
And those are
it wasn't going to be
conversations.
good.
Those are conversations I've had. I know there's conversations that you've had, like finding another mission,
Yep.
for our guys and our gals. Like once the mission of serving is, quote up, is finding that other mission, finding the other purpose, have them drive forward. But as you mentioned, here was something that was dear and near to your heart, coaching volleyball. Yes, it helped, but it didn't mask everything. It didn't fix everything. There was still a lot of work to be done.
Massive amount of work for myself personally, right? Like um, I recognize that I love being in the gym with the kids, and I ran a boys volleyball program, and one of the largest in the country at the time, and it's still one of the largest in the country, 20 plus teams. So you're talking hundreds, thousands of athletes over the 15 years that I was there as the director for the boys program, and was very fulfilling, right? I utilized a lot of the lessons learned from the military as far as discipline and understanding how to fight through the tough times and tough challenges, and tried to instill that within the young athletes, because that's, I think it's a very important skill that we have to learn. It wasn't just about volleyball, it's about how do we introduce life lessons into that, right? um, but over time, I recognized that there was still a void inside of me, and obviously the more we discuss and recognize and identify how badly our veteran community was hurting, myself included. Um, but we hide that really well. Some of us are capable of really masking how much we're struggling. Um, a lot of time it's a positive way though, because we're just continuing to push through. We're not giving up. We're fighting through it. So opportunity presented itself um, about a year and a half ago. It was the spring of 2023, um, that through some conversations, I was, uh, um, introduced to April. At the time, was our executive director with Dogs for Our Brave. They were looking to hire, and they were specifically looking to hire a veteran because they did not have a veteran on staff at time. So after a 2-hour conversation, it was pretty clear that the passions aligned, and I saw an opportunity for me to be doc again, and that it's a position I never thought I'd be able to fill again.
And you say that an opportunity to be doc again, and I'm just going to say this because I think it's a great transition, to talking more about dogs for our brave. It's not just about the dog,
Yeah.
right? Like,
No.
I was thinking about that when I can remember what
Yeah.
you said just a few minutes ago, and I was reading your shirt, and I'm like, that's 100% correct, right? And in the conversation that we had a few weeks ago, like that was the thing that just set in my mind is like, because we have the opportunity to have, a trained canine, and she's awesome. So she's family protection, obedient trained, and just thinking of like the having her because we got her um November 2 years ago, um, 2 years, yes, because the baby's birthday was yesterday. So we got her in November. Our youngest daughter was born in December, and then my dad passed away unexpectedly in January. And I just think about her from the standpoint of like her being there during that time and being trained, how it filled that void and having her because she traveled everywhere that I went because it would be very difficult for Katie to take care of a pup, a newborn, and two other kids.
A
As I'm
lot.
traveling from St. Louis back to West Virginia, for a lot of the stuff that was going on with dads, passing away. And that was what I was thinking about. Like, that was so cool is the sense of what you guys are doing. It's not just about the dog. Getting a dog for a veteran, while it fills a big void and there's so many positive benefits, there's other aspects that we got to work at. And that's what I love when you say, like, get a chance to be doc again, because there's a lot of other things that we can do.
It, I don't necessarily real I didn't realize immediately how much that doc mentality would come into play. I mean, to be fully honest, when they hired me, Jeremy, they didn't really know. They knew what my title was, but they're like,
Yeah.
Brian, we don't really know exactly what your roles get. Like, you're going to kind of get to write your own job description as you go through this, which ironically, that's kind of what happened when I, came back and dove back into the boys program with high performance in the volleyball side. It really wasn't flushed out, and they're like, "You're going to get to build your job description." I'm like, "Okay, well, that sounds familiar." Coming into Dogs for a Brave, I'm like, I can deal with that. So it's switching careers at 45 years old, 46 years old. That's not typical for most. Um, but I get to jump from one passion to another. How many people get to do that and as a living?
Well,
Um,
if I know our listeners, I know probably 50% of them have are already Googled dogs for our brave. But for the other 50% that may be out on their walk or driving and have not looked it up yet, let's talk a little bit about it. And then, kind of after you give a little history, talk about your vision, right? Like what you see as far as, once again, putting on your doc hat and some of the other things that, you're wanting to provide in the future for the veterans, kind of go into that to wrap this up. Because, like I said, I think them hearing it, because I know a lot of them are going to look it up. I just know that's, a lot of people who listen to the show are individuals that I've worked with in the past for nutritional education, and that's just how they're wired. But I also think it's good to hear it from yourself.
So Dogs for Our Brave started in 2014, um, founded by Andy and Marilyn Gladstein, who live in Southern California. Um, it it started out of a situation where Andy was looking for something completely unique for their 36th wedding anniversary, I believe. Um, and he had befriended one of the commandants at the Navy SEAL training um, academy out there in Southern California. And through conversations with him, he said, he kind of threw it out there and said, "Hey, I'm looking for something different. What should I do?" And this individual suggested, "Well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to find a dog. You're going to have this dog professionally trained. And then you're going to present that dog to an injured soldier, Marine, airman, whatever the case may be, that's just come back from Iraq or Afghanistan." Great. How do I go about doing that? I have no flipping clue. You're the one with all the money and the ideas. Go figure it out. Was essentially the gist of the conversation. So Andy did. He bought a dog, found a trainer in Phoenix, um, had that dog trained. He flew out to Walter Reed and started interviewing potential candidates. Found an individual, amputee, Sergeant Scott Smith, and presented that dog. Surprised Maryland on their anniversary at a luncheon. And lo and behold, Dogs for Our Brave was started. They didn't realize it at the time, but they had a lot of friends that wanted to do the same thing. And they're like, well, we're going to start a charity. 2000, fast forward 2018, they move operations to St. Louis. They buy a facility here in Dogtown, which is where we're currently located. Um, and continue. That's when the mission really started to grab a little bit more understanding of what we wanted to become. Um, but really, to be honest, me coming on board with the executive director we had at the time, April, who has now moved into our director of fundraising, um, Bridget, who is our director of training, and she's now been in that position for I think about 3 years now. But she had worked as a trainer prior to that, and then Carol Sheehan coming on board as our director of operations. Within the last year and a half, we've really started to understand who we're going to become because the mission just on its own, right? So we provide mobility based um, service dogs to wounded combat veterans who have honorably served, and we provide that service dog at no cost for anything. Excuse me.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I understand it. That's for life. Like you guys take care of, and that was what in our last
Training,
conversation, something that just really stood out for me is like,
training, veterinary care,
yes,
food, equipment. The veterans travel. If they come in town, they have to be paired with the dog because we serve nationwide.
yeah, not just
Um,
not just
we
St.
pay
Louis.
for everything. We
Yeah,
pay for everything: the hotel, the food, the airfare if that's required. So our veteran pays nothing, right? Obviously, that's an incredible mission, and people read that standing on itself, and they're like, "How do I get involved?" That's outstanding, right? But as I dug into it, I recognized, out speaking the mission with other team members. One day, it just kind of flipped, and it was only a couple months in, Jeremy, that I recognized we have such a greater opportunity here, right? We have such a a bigger chance to really impact change within the veteran community, but within the community in general, right? Within the country. And I started speaking from the heart and really talking about the real challenges that our veteran community is facing. I've lost 10 plus um, soldiers that I served with, um, either directly to suicide and or substance abuse, you name it, right? Um, That's the reality of it. The 22 a day, we wish it was only 22 a day. We know it's higher, right? 20 plus years of heavy combat operations tells us that we are in uncharted territories. right? We are in uncharted waters when it comes to what our veteran community is struggling with. Um, and recognizing through my own personal struggles, right, and how we try to find um, peace in our journey, right? That's ultimately what I think most veterans, especially combat veterans, we're looking for peace. We true inner peace. It's not going to come through medications, right? The therapies, whatnot, those are helpful, right? But it has to be a holistic approach to how we heal our mind, body, spirit, and relationships. That there is a balance that has to be found, right? So the dog is our bridge to enter the veteran's life and start having some hard conversations about where are you on this journey? How can we help? How can I find you resources? We don't have all the resources, right? I can, I'm a pretty good listener and I can have some pretty heartfelt and deep conversations, but I'm not here to solve those problems. I'm here to help facilitate to get them to someone who can help them in whatever their battle may be, right? Which is why we're sitting here having this conversation from the body aspect of things, which directly impacts the mind, right? And can absolutely stir the soul to move in the right direction. So our goal for our veterans is to help them become the best version of themselves again. I don't care what they've gone through, right? We see incredible examples of individuals like Travis Mills and Rob Jones. And if your listeners aren't familiar with any of them, Google them as well because they're incredible human beings.
And I'm
That
sure there's hundreds out there that maybe don't have
you can
a
continue.
that don't
Absolutely.
have yeah, that don't have a following that have
Yeah,
done well, right?
absolutely. So it's just, those we can heal ourselves. We absolutely have. It's helping them understand that you empower them, that you have the strength, right? And too many of our veterans, right? They they have that labeling of a disabled. We're not disabled, right? We've gone through a lot of traumatic events, and the more that we can learn how to come to peace with whatever we experienced, we can take that trauma and turn it into strength, in strength in so many different levels, right? Strength to re-engage with our family and our caregivers, right? Strength to re-engage with our close circle, strength to re-engage with our community, right? And get out and create positive change, which we so badly need right now in this country. Let's
You know,
let's
in everyone, right?
Yeah,
And that's where I'm super excited because I know, like, just speaking nutrition, exercise, right? Like, it's not going to fix something, but it would make the situation better, right?
yeah,
And for example, if we have someone who is just eating terrible and terrible and put a definition of that, maybe they're drinking a lot of sodas, they're eating a lot of sugary food, and then they're like, well, I don't have energy to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, the reason we may not have the energy is secondary to what you're choosing to eat, and that's a choice.
yeah,
Like, yes, it is not going to fix this over here, right? It's not going to replace your arm. It's not going to replace the leg. I got that, and I understand that, but it will also make you feel better. And we get a lot of people in general with this. It's like, man, I just don't feel like moving. We don't feel like moving because you didn't move.
yeah,
Once you move a little bit, you feel much better, and you want to move.
yeah.
And I think that goes, not only for our veterans, but that's everybody, in
Agreed.
those two things. And man, I am super excited that you asked for some assistance. Once again, we've already started this out with we're not professionals in certain things, but we know a few things in a couple of different areas. And I'm super super blessed and grateful once again that you've asked me to kind of help out from the nutritional aspect for those veterans that they get to that point where they want it, right? And they have that conversation with you, or they have that conversation with someone on your team, and they're like, you know what? I do want to learn how to eat better so I feel better. And then that I can then step into that role. So that's something, super exciting, things that I'm just thinking about, from our first conversation.
Yeah, Jeremy, they just again, it just goes back to empowerment. These little things, so-called little things, are the big things, right? The changes in the diet, the learning how to just simply take care of our bodies again, I think breaking that mold of, I'm that old, grumpy, overweight vet, right? Like sitting at the bar, bellied up. Like that's who we are, right? That's what veterans are supposed to be. These grizzled, you know, out of shape dudes that are just through the core. Like we need to change that narrative, right? We need to be the leaders based on what we've experienced and done in our lives. We can help change the narrative across the board about how to live healthy lives, how to take hard times and struggles and turn them into strength. Um, and it starts with all these little changes, right? The giving up of soda, stopping putting poison. Food is fuel, right? What are we putting in our bodies? How do we want to feel, right? Um, so I'm extremely grateful that you were willing to take this on and start having some conversations with myself and some of our veterans. And because again, the old adage of it takes a village. Well, when I speak out in public a lot, I talk about, when we go into a combat zone and a combat situation, we need so many entities to win that battle, to win that war. Air support, infantry, medics, cooks, logistics, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on and on. The battle that we're in right now within the veteran community is going to take all parts, right? So we need so many resources to be engaged in this fight. No one entity or two entities is going to help us win this battle. So you and your expertise within your field and within the nutrition side of things and the exercise, getting up and move, right? Like it's vital. We need all of these aspects. So I'm just very blessed and grateful to have your support on this.
All right, Brian, for those that are out on their walk or currently driving, what is your website? And, if you have a good email or how, if people wanted to get involved or had questions, how can they get a hold of you guys? That would be something I just wanted to provide. And then I can always put it in our show notes, for those that, once again, can find that easily in the notes.
So Dogs for Our Brave, our website is dfob.org. Sorry, dot com. Oh no, I'm totally blanking on the website. We just moved into a new website, but if you Google Dogs for Our Brave, you're gonna pull it up for me. Thank you. Uh,
That's it.
but yeah, Carol just spent a lot of time revamping and putting out and rolling out a brand new website. It's outstanding. It reads exceptionally well. There's great videos on there, testimonials from some of our veterans that currently have dogs, which if you're looking for some motivation and whatnot, like you hop on there and you start seeing some of our testimonials from our veterans. It's very moving. Um, we are on all of the platforms, from Instagram to Facebook to X, and you can simply it's Dogs for Our Brave on all of those platforms. Again, a lot of great content on there. My email address, if you're a veteran and you're curious about what or what our program entails, it's Bryan Bryan at dfob.org. Shoot me an email. Again, if you're looking for resources for other help, I might be able to help you out there as well. But check us out. There's a lot of information out there. Our funding, majority of our funding, we are getting ready to move facilities. It's very exciting because of the growth we've had over the last year and a half. We were able to secure some incredible funding that's going to allow us to move into a new facility come, later this year. Which takes us from a 1,600 square foot facility to a 16,000 square foot facility with an acre behind the property for training. So we're going to be able to train more dogs. We're going to be able to grow the programming. I'm actually working on building more programming outside of our mobility assistance program, looking at getting into the PTS service dog side of things. So it's an exciting time with Dogs for Our Brave. I'm very fortunate to be a part of it. And, I'm glad that you're on board now too to help us spread the mission and
Love it.
ultimately serve more veterans.
You are 100% correct. It's dfob.org. So you were correct.
Thanks.
That is
This
the
head cold got me a little.
That's all right, right? And I'm super excited, man. I'm glad, and I don't want to leave this out. Our paths crossed because of Carol, and Carol is, once again a vital part of your team, but she's also a vital part of my team on Team Alpha and the community that I educate. on the First Form app. And I tell those folks all the time, like, I don't think they realize how big of a part they are of my life, but like I spend the majority of my time inside that app having conversations with them. And that's how we crossed. And once again, I'm blessed and thankful and excited about the future.
Absolutely. Let's make some good happen. Let's make some positive change.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys. And for the listeners, I appreciate you guys listening. And if you do us a favor, please share this one maybe across some social media platforms, as this one is kind of broad and, maybe it's not one that is direct that you would share to someone specifically, but more of a broad share to kind of get the word out. We appreciate you.